to the design for non-designing components. It's a bit surreal being here. Actually, I'm usually on your side of the things when I'm watching these presentations by Be Online, so it's really nice to be on this side. So Matt's gone through some design for using the quiz slides, and just what I want to touch on is just look at some basic designing principles for those of you that may not necessarily have been designers or had much experience with design itself. Now, I've got a quick poll here. Do it. You'll get an amazing skill set and some incredible stuff that you'll be able to make out of it. But what I'm kind of doing is that I came from a background where I was a workshop facilitator who generally fell into e-learning. So I didn't necessarily know everything about, I didn't know anything about design really, and a lot of it I've kind of picked up as I've gone along. So basically what I've found is that, you've all probably heard of the CRAP principles. Now, the CRAP principles are basically 4 basic rules when it comes to designing that if you can get these right, it allows your designs to look quite holistically unified. They look good. They can get some a bit of variety out of them, and it's just that they're not hard to follow. I think the best thing with design is that design can be very subjective. So what some people really, really like, others may not like at all. But if you get these basic rules right, then you can get a design that looks quite good, that's effective, and that actually helps to not overtake the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve, but at least support those learning outcomes. So what I want to do is I'm just going to take some time to go through these 4 little quick principles, and it's kind of just to kind of give you a bit of background in regards to if you haven't come across it before, or if you have come across it before, this might be a good refresher, and happy for you guys to share anything that comes through in regards to your own experience when it comes to the principles themselves. So what does it stand for? So C stands for contrast, R stands for repetition, A for alignment, and P for proximity. Okay, and I'm going to go into these in a bit more detail individually. So let's start with C. So C is all about contrast. Now, contrast is all about, it basically means difference. So a boring design is a design that just looks all the same. Okay, there's nothing different. There's nothing that particularly stands out. And the human brain really likes looking for differences, because what they tend to do then is we go, oh, I wonder why that is different. What's happened? Why have they done something in particular in that way? So our brain tends to look for these things. And in design, you can actually contrast a number of differing elements to assist people in making first your design interesting, but also helping to support that overall learning of what's actually happening and what's going on. So I've got a slide there which says we've got some big news about some small changes. So, that's a valid point. If someone wants to learn something, like that makes sense. When it comes to contrast, though, if you just do a bit of a play with some of the little elements, so for example, we've just kind of played on the big and the small, so we've made the big a bit bigger and the small a bit smaller, it tends to draw a bit of attention to it. So it kind of goes, oh, that's nice to look at, or that's a bit more interesting. I can actually, it's saying, oh, okay, so there's something different going on here. So it kind of hits that message home a bit better. And you can contrast all sorts of things. You can contrast your headings and your body, which is one of the key things that people mostly use with contrast. So if we had text where our titles or our headings looked exactly the same as our body content, it'd be hard to work out where the various topics start or where they even finish. So actually making our headings either bolding them or underlining them or making them even a couple of spaces away from the main body just makes them stand out a bit more to look at. The other area we can actually play with a lot of contrast comes down to color. Now, I've seen some really dodgy contrasting colors around the place, but also some really good, smart-looking contrasted colors. And if you're ever playing with color and trying to work out what looks good, a good starting point can be some of your favorite sports teams, whether that be rugby league or AFL or basketball or netball or whatever the case may be. A lot of their uniforms are based around some good contrasting colors. Now, I'm not saying they're all good, but a lot of them do actually are a good starting point to say, okay, well, South Sydney Rabbitohs, red and green. Okay, I like the Rabbitohs. They must be good. Let's see what I can do with that. So you might be able to play with those particular contrasts to bring out your key points either in the red, as the case may be, or the green as it goes on. So contrasting is just playing around with making things look a little bit different. The second key concept when it comes to principles of design is the idea of repetition. Now, I don't know about you guys, but there's probably things we do in our daily job that we do either against a checklist or we do it over and over again just to make sure we get it done, that we remember it, and that we make sure it helps us function during the day. Dragons all the way. Yeah, I thought someone would come through with a red and white soon, so thanks for that, Michael. So repetition is our next point. And if you have a look at these three examples here, these are probably an example of where you haven't got very good repetition happening. So we've got different headings, we've got different fonts, we've got different alignments happening here. We've got spaces in some areas, no spacing in other areas. And repetition even comes down to something as simple as your UI. So your interface that you've created for someone when it comes to online, when it comes to e-learning, people don't want to guess where to find the next button or the previous button or how to interact with the page. And that's one of the reasons why whenever we do an online learning module, as in the industry, we usually put together something there which is basically, this is how you actually use the module. We don't want people learning how to use the module to be a hard thing to do, because we want their concentration and their effort to go into the actual learning gap that we've identified that the online learning is going to actually meet. So we want to try and get that interface stuff happening at the beginning. And one of the great ways to make that become second nature for someone generally comes down to, all right, let me make sure that my buttons are in the same spot. Let me make sure that my headings are repeated exactly the same, so they're the same size. Let me make sure they're the same font. And let me make sure that when I'm justifying stuff that I'm not doing a left alignment here, a right alignment there, whacking in a fully justified alignment here, or whatever the case may be. So just making sure that when we're doing it, that we're repeating it so that it actually looks like everything belongs together. So if you have a look at the same three slides, there's a couple of things we've done here. We've basically left aligned everything. Okay, so we've left aligned stuff just to make it a little bit more cleaner as far as our text goes. Our headings are now all the same font. They're the same font size, and they're all been bolded together as well. There's the space between our heading and our body text is similar across the board. And the last thing is our kind of images we've used, we've repeated the same type of image. I don't know about you guys, but one of the things that frustrates me when I'm looking at an online module is modules that have used all sorts of different imagery left, right, and center without much thought for the overall look. So you might have a photo here, a line drawing there, and maybe a bit of clip art here. And, a lot of clip art doesn't probably look as professional as we want it to look either. So it really comes down to making sure the images we're choosing are not only complementing the learning event we're trying to achieve, but they're also not distracting from it. Because the minute we start swapping and changing and throwing in clip art and a photo and something here, unless we're trying to make that contrasting effort, it just makes it hard. People look at stuff and they go, it's just messy. I mean, if you looked at those previous three slides on their own as you went through, you can even see that the center one has a different color gray in there. It kind of gets a bit distracting for the end user. And sometimes our end users are frustrated enough trying to use some online learning that they don't need anything else to give them any more excuses. So really important when it comes to repetition, just to make sure that everything looks like it's meant to belong together. Which brings us to our next one, when it comes to alignment. So I did touch on this with the repetition previously, but alignment's also extremely important. Whenever you put something on the page, it is actually connected to everything else on the page by an invisible line. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, on the left-hand side, what you're looking at is you're looking at an image, you're looking at some text. One's been left aligned, one's been central aligned. You've got a next and previous button that have been kind of not really, they're kind of thrown there. And if you have a look at them closely, you can see they're actually out of whack as well. Whereas on the right-hand side, what we've done is we've taken that and we've said, okay, let's make sure all this alignment is where it's meant to be. So everything's left aligned. We've then also moved our previous and next button down to more of the middle area of our bottom banner. And we've also made them actually look like they're on the same, I guess, surface. Probably a better way to look at this is when I said everything's connected by a line is have a look at this slide here. So you can see how everything is lined up against these particular slides. So if we try to draw lines on the first image, they'd be all over the place. We couldn't do it. So sometimes within Storyline, you can use the grid or the line areas to give you a bit of guidance as far as where they are. But what I find is the best thing to use whenever you throw anything on a slide is this particular option here within my menu. And besides probably the eye-dropping tool to pick up the right kind of colors, I find I use the Arrange tool the most. Can I just ask in the chat, do people use the Arrange tool a lot when they're designing? Just put a yes or a no when you throw in there, just so we can get an idea of who's actually doing it. Yep. Yep. All right, cool. Guys, if you're someone who doesn't use it, it just makes life so much easier when you're trying to line stuff up on a particular page. And all these things, whether it's the other one that I find really helps out when I've got multiple items is the distribute horizontally and the distribute vertically. especially when you're trying to get things just to sit right. Symmetry is a beautiful thing. Thanks, Marcus. I agree. Having said that, I mean, all of these rules when it comes to design, they are rules. And once you know the rules, you can break them. And it's like everything in life. If you understand the rules and why rules are in place, you can break them to get certain effects. So you might find that an alignment rule you can break, which will give you a really good contrast for whatever you're trying to achieve. But the important thing is we've really got to get down first to make sure that we've got the rule set so we know how we're operating. All right, so that's alignment. And the last one is proximity. And this is pretty straightforward too. And the best way to probably demonstrate this is on the left-hand side, you can see a screen there where it's got a caption for the photo. And for some reason, the caption's been thrown right down in the bottom right-hand corner. There's no link between that caption and the photo without the end user trying hard to work out, oh, what does that go to? Oh, okay, maybe that's referring to that photo up there. And the problem with that statement is that maybe. If the things that human beings hate, they hate things that that don't make sense. So if things don't make sense, they have a habit of going, all right, how can I make sense of this? So that there just makes hard work. So if you're trying to get someone to learn a particular skill set or particular basis in regards to a learning change, getting them to do extra work to try and understand what they're looking at or what something's referring to just makes hard work for them. As you can see on the right-hand side, we've moved the caption up directly under the photo, so it's obvious that that caption has to do with that photo. And this rule kind of comes into play too. If you've got interactivities in your online module that you want people to actually, you're giving people instructions about, you need to make sure those instructions are nearby. So if you've got a tab you want people to click on, you need to make it really obvious that, hey, here are the tabs here, or here is the thing you need to drag and drop here. Now, whether that might be via instructions or it might be through markers and callouts, but it's just making sure that people aren't having to do any hard work in their head to work out how to interact with the actual module. Design's not just about whether something looks pretty, it's also about how something works. And if you read anything about in regards to what Apple does with their products, they never talk about how something looks or how pretty it is. It's always about how it actually works. And as a designer, you want to try and make things to work as easily as you possibly can without causing any great brain power. Yeah, exactly right, Amy. Simple is smart design. And, you always can run the risk of over-designing something. So it's really interesting when you come to a final product. I spoke to someone once who they said, all right, I've got my final design. They actually started removing elements until the design broke. And that's how they got things down to a really simple, minimalist design that worked, but also achieved the learning objectives or the learning outcomes that they wanted to achieve. So once we've got our 4 rules down, when it comes to designing, we kind of want to say, all right, so we know we're creating a module. Maybe we're doing an information module for an organization. One of the things that I find is helpful is I put together a quick little style guide, a quick little visual guide. Now, some larger organizations, they may already have this as part of their marketing department. They'll have a visual design guide or a style guide, which is absolute gold for a developer. If you can get hold of that, that's already pulled out a lot of the colors they already use. It's also probably pulled out a lot of the fonts they probably already use as well. So there's a heap of stuff there that you can actually get from that design guide. But if you don't have access to that, you can also make your own. So I've just thrown some boxes up on the screen here. And I might just get, Matt, can you just give me a hand for 2 seconds? I just want to be able to, I'll just put it on mute for 2 seconds, guys. Great. Okay. So this is my little style guide. So what I've done here is I've gone, all right, so I want to try and work out some key colors. Cue the elevator music. I was thinking the girl from Ipanema personally, but I don't know whether we've got that on file here. I'll see if we can dig it out for next time round. So when we're making a style guide, we're going, all right, so if they don't have a style guide, we can put one together. Now, this slide I'm pulling out, this is just a random logo I pulled off Google. This is for the Calgary Mustangs, which is an ice hockey team. Okay, so I'm not actually developing an online module for them currently. I'm just using it as an example. So what it's doing here is I'm kind of looking at it going, all right, what can I pull out of this information so I've got a bit of an idea of what I can play with? Now, as far as colors go, I can pull out some key colors from the logo straight away. So one of the ways I can do that is I've got my little boxes here, so I can highlight those. I'm going to change my shape fill and get my eyedropper tool. As I said, this is probably the other key one that I use on a regular basis. And I'm just going to pull this dark blue out to start with. All right, so that gives me a box in regards to my bright blue. Then I'm going to do this again. All right, so for my next one, I think I might access the, let's say, I'll pull that lighter blue out. There we go. And again, I'll pull that yellow out, so that's a good color that I can also use. And finally, I tend to, when I'm looking at colors, I tend to try and work on just maybe 2 to 3 colors, no more. You can add extra colors, and some style guides give you multiple tertiary colors you can draw upon, but I like to play with maybe about 3 colors, and then I can pull in some neutrals. Now, you probably can't see it on this little screen capture of the website, but there's a really like warm gray up the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that in as well as a neutral that I can use just to, if I want to, highlight something or put a border on something, whatever the case may be. Last but not least, I'm just going to get rid of my outlines. All right, so that gives me straight away some colors that I can play with, okay? So I've got those 3 key colors. Now, the second thing I've done is when I've gone to the website, I've had a look to see, okay, what kind of fonts are they using on the website? What kind of typography? Now, here's a keyboard hint. I was talking to Craig earlier on about keyboard hints. If you pull up a web page in your internet browser, and if you press the F12 button, it pulls up what's called development mode. Okay, so if you've got this enabled on Internet Explorer, is one that I use, and what it does, it'll show you all the HTML code behind it. You can also do it on other browsers by going View Source. And what you do then is just do a quick file search, say, okay, I'm looking for a font. Where's the font reference? And 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to pull out the reference in the back end saying, okay, font equals Tahoma, or font equals Arial, or font equals Century Gothic. And from that, you can go, great, I've already got my font straight away. Now, when I did this to the actual Calgary Mustangs website, I found out that the font that they generally use on the website is Tahoma. So I said, all right, well, let's use that. So I'm just going to switch both of these boxes just over to Tahoma when I get it up here. Close. Okay. All right. Now I've kind of done a starting size of my headings to be about 24 points, and I've pulled out a body content to be about 12 points. Now, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes fonts, a 12-point font in Century Gothic may not look exactly the same size as a 12-point font in Franklin Gothic or something else. So it does require a little bit of eye to play with it to say, all right, what looks good? So I'm going to stick with 12-point for my body here because I do like that, but I'm just going to bring this title down a little bit so it's not so big. Maybe I'll bring it down to about 20-point. Okay. Now I'm happy with that. So that just kind of gives me a reminder that when I'm actually going through and building the module, I'm going to work with my titles being Tahoma at 20-point, and I'm going to work with my body being at Tahoma at 12-point. Okay, and it's a good little reminder to have because sometimes when you go through and create interactions or you're playing with master slides or a case may be, Storyline sometimes auto-sizes stuff for you, so it's really important to go back and just check that all your headings are where they're meant to be. All right, last but not least, what I've done is I've just gone to the website and I've pulled in, say, is there any other assets that I might be able to use here? Is there anything that I like to look at? Now, they're an ice hockey team, so I pulled out an image of an ice hockey, so that might allow me to go, all right, so maybe as a background I could use an ice hockey rink, I could use a puck, a hockey stick, maybe even the armor and the helmets they use. But it also gives me some more ideas about what these guys look like, so it also shows me that white's a primary color in their actual uniform, so I might want to play with white a bit more when I'm actually putting it together. And the final one, if you have a look at that little spotlight area there, that's just a banner they use consistently throughout the website. So I might be able to either use that banner or maybe even enhance that banner in regards to actually playing with for some of my titles. So this style guide suddenly goes, all right, well, I've got a logo, I've got the website for some further inspiration, I've pulled out my key colors, I've pulled out my key fonts, and I've got some other assets I can play with. Now I can start looking at how do I actually want to put this layout together. A couple of rules of thumbs that I like to play with in regards to colors. I try and work with no more than about 3 colors and just maybe some neutrals. And I don't know about you guys, but one of the things I do in my spare time is renovate a house. And one of the things about renovations, when you come to painting, they talk about, interior design paint, that you should use your primary color. It uses 60% of your surfaces, your secondary color on 30% of your surfaces, and your tertiary color on 10% of your surfaces. Now, I don't know if that works for you. Some modules it works, some modules it doesn't. But it's just a matter of going, all right, so what kind of ratio do I want to use these colors in? As I can see from the logo, the blue kind of seems to be their key color. So I might keep that in mind when I'm doing some development with them. When it comes to fonts, I used to stick to 2 fonts, no more than 3. So they tend to be your title font and your body font. If you need something for a caption or a highlight or instructions or whatever the case may be, then you can pull a 3rd one in. Now, typography is an entire art form to itself, so that's something that we'd probably have to look at in more detail in a later session or a seminar. But basically, yeah, that allows you to go, all right, I've got my colors from the logo, from the website, I've done a quick search via the developer to pull some fonts out, and I've got some assets as well. So then you've made a quick 1-page style guide, which will help you when you're putting together the actual module. All right, so I'm just coming to then. Any questions before I just hit on the last couple of slides, or any observations or things that people have liked? No worries. Thanks, Lee. And look, guys, none of this is reinventing the wheel. Like, a lot of this stuff you may already do. I just find that when I'm putting something together, it kind of helps when I've actually got the guide itself, just to kind of, as a reminder, like this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm doing. Do I keep a record of my style guides for future use? I do, Kate. Yeah, good question. I usually put them with all my project materials when I'm developing the modules. And what I'll do is if I meet with a client again, or if I'm speaking to an SME, I'll pull that out and have a look at it and just check that the style is still meeting what they're trying to achieve. So if it is, great, we can use it again. If not, then I'd probably look at developing something else. Just a reminder, the great thing about the style guide too, getting back to the CRAP principles, we talk about, repetition and so forth. So it's really important to make sure that if you're creating a series of modules for these guys, that all those modules look the same. So they look holistic and they look like they all come from the same point. All right. I'm running out of time here, guys, so just a couple of quick things. I just wanted to touch on typography. As I said, typography is a whole world to itself. I've worked with a graphic designer previously, and every time you talk about typography, he would start drooling, his eyes would go glassy. He just thought it was the best thing ever. And he said to me, you're a real designer when you start walking around the streets looking at signs and you start asking, I wonder what font that is. I wonder what size that is. I wonder what the case is with that. So typography is a great thing that can be really, really powerful and that you can actually play with as well. So I just want to show you a quick example of that. Do I find myself straying away from my style guide? Yes, sometimes I do. Absolutely. It depends on the need of the module. I mean, ultimately, guys, we're all learning and development specialists, and we know that our key end user is the one that we're making the difference for. So if there's something that I need to adjust or change based on what my end user needs, then absolutely I'll stray away from the style guide. I try not to, because I want to try and keep that holistic view and that unity view. But if something calls for it, I will. All right, so typography. So this is a module that I worked on a year or so ago for an IT company. This was part of their internet security policy. So this was just some stats they gave me in regards to some information they wanted to share with their end learners. So basically what we did was we thought, do we want to just throw all this text on a screen, or do we want to play with it? And I tend to try and steer away from too much text on a screen. But what I did like about this is that we could actually have a bit of a play with this to see what we could do with typography. And if you guys look at many infographics around the place, they're a great source of inspiration to get some ideas together for some quick stuff. So here's the content that I was given, and this is what we ended up doing with it, just have a bit of a play with it. So generally, if we look at our CRAP rules and our style guide, we picked a primary color, which was our blue. We picked a secondary color, which was our white, and we didn't steer away from those two colors because it kind of gave really good contrast as far as the content goes. We chose 2 fonts for this one. So one was a font called Babas New, which you may or may not be familiar with. That's the actual where it says bigger and better cybercrimes area. So that's this font here, this big one here. It's a really nice caps font if you're looking for something along those lines. And the rest of it was just Arial. Okay, so using this, we could actually pull some information out and make it a bit more interesting to look at. You can see the arrows kind of join up as you go around. There's a cool thing within Storyline where if you use your transitions right, it looks like the actual screen is moving around a giant poster. So the arrows kind of helped with that kind of illusion, which was good. So just by using a bit of typography and adjusting our sizes, so we're looking at a bit of contrast there. So our key points were quite large so people could see them. Our lesser key points are a bit smaller. We're repeating the key elements. So you can see we've used all these tiny little these like white icons to illustrate the points we're talking about, whether it be, Mr. Anonymous over here, the hacker, or a rocket ship for launching attacks, or people pinching money. So it's just kind of repeating that particular theme as we went through. And most of these were some Shutterstock images that we purchased around icons and so forth. So that was something that worked well for us in regards to typography. So you don't always have to be restricted to, text on left, picture on right. You can actually play around with it and see what you can do. So guys, I'm just going to finalize up. So a couple of quick links here, which we will probably also, I don't know whether you'll be able to click on them from the screen. If not, I'll throw them in the chat very, very soon. There's some great tools here in regards to visual design, some hints, some guides. There's a website there called Template Monster, which you may or may not be familiar with. If you're looking for some inspiration, they have some great layouts and some great ideas. Predominantly it is for web design and content management systems, but a lot of it can be translated into an online module point of view. There's some great stuff from Articulate themselves. You're probably all very familiar with who Tom Kuhlman is. He's got some great stuff in regards to visual graphic design hints, same as Dave Anderson. So some good stuff on the Articulate site in regards to it. There's a series of blogs that I'm currently doing for Be Online, which is about designing for non-designers, which is looking at all these elements and kind of just breaking it down into some basic rules for anyone that may not have any design experience. And there's also an ebook that Articulate have released too, which is an essential guide to visual design. So it talks about the CRAP principles and so forth as well, and some really good hints and tips in regards to your own visual design. Last thing I want to leave you with is 3 points. Design is subjective, as I said at the beginning. Design, what one person really, really likes, someone else may not like. The thing about design is don't get precious about your designs. If someone doesn't like it, that's cool, all right? It's a subjective thing and it is based on opinions. But always take their feedback with some, okay, what can I use out of that? Was there something I can develop? Like everything, guys, if you're L&D specialist, you always want to make sure you're continually improving yourself. So just remember, design's subjective. Not everyone is going to like your design, but everyone should be able to give you at least some positive feedback that you can go, okay, that's great. I can use that in my next design, or I can actually use that in this current design to make it better. The second point is the key one. A lot of people go, oh, I'm not a designer, I can't do this. Everyone is creative. As kids, we all played make-believe, all right? Unfortunately, as adults, we forget how to do that, all right? We're all creative. The challenge is just translating that vision, whether it be through layout, whether it be through elements, design, colors, through interactions, through variables, etc. Everything is achievable within Storyline itself. You just got to get clever with some of it. So it's just the challenge is translating the vision. And the key point I want to leave you with is just make sure that it's not about copying other people's design, but use theirs to inspire your own. All right, there's a heap of really good design stuff that's out there and a lot of great stuff that you can get out of it. So use it as inspiration, guys. See what you can use, but obviously don't copy it because that's not what it's about. It's about going, hey, that's a really good treatment of that particular product or that particular color or that layout. I can use that. All right. Thank you for your time, guys. I do appreciate spending some time to kick back with you. I'm going to pass back to Matt for our next section of the online group. And look, if you have any questions or any information, please throw them in the chat, throw them in the questions, or even send us an email. Happy to follow up with anything at the later date. Okay, I'll hand it back to Matt.